Hey everyone, I'm Sean with Bayo String Quartet. Whether performing or preparing, we're constantly working on music. And what's astounding is how much of it is just awesome. But what makes it awesome? This live stream show is about us individually diving into the heart of this question. And then meeting here to enlighten, question, and share with each other where we've gone and what we've found. And of course, we hope to take you with us. So Mozart's Dissonant Quartet, the first movement, I guess, is what we're doing. I have to say, I actually don't know if he gave it the title Dissonant or someone else did.
I haven't encountered anything about that, but it seems like it's just maybe a nickname it earned from the very dissonant opening.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating because this is still a time where pieces are being named basically by their form and what they are. This is String Quartet number 19, or over here we have Symphony 1, and then you get this name, I suppose, because something like that, a super standout feature. I don't even know that much about the time period, like in terms of specific things that were happening around it, but I know it's very famous.
You know, it I don't know, it kind of blows my mind. What are we talking about, 22 bars? And that's just such an insignificant amount of music when like it's compared to like the whole thing. And a lot of times nicknames are kind of irritating anyway because either they're given by the publisher. It's just a name that's stuck. I'm remembering that line from a famous movie, and it's like, but it is really wild, especially for the time. It's totally dissonant. I know that Mozart composed, this is like the last of a set of quartets that he composed, and he mailed them to Haydn to say, hey, we've had this thing going on, an association for a number of years. What do you think about these quartets?
He actually dedicated them to him.
Okay, yeah, so even better. So it's like Mozart really, he must have been very proud of his work, with this whole set. And this quartet is super famous, so we're thrilled to jump into it.
It's funny that you mentioned Haydn because a lot of when I was sort of studying a little bit about this piece and thinking about this piece, Haydn just keeps coming back, and I think the obvious connection is that it's part of this set of quartets Mozart wrote that are dedicated to Haydn. So obviously right there, he's on your radar. But what's I think really interesting about it is that Haydn even wrote, by the way, Haydn thought very highly of Mozart. They were friends. Mozart had moved to Vienna and they played in a string quartet together. Wouldn't you love to be like one of the musicians? I don't know who the other two were, but I think Mozart played viola and
Dittersdorf.
Was it Dittersdorf?
And Von Hall played the cello.
Oh, so it's not even no names. I mean,
yeah,
these
there's
are
some people.
other people I've heard of. So first of all, that would be amazing. But I know they played these quartets together, and Mozart wrote them almost as response to a set of quartets Haydn wrote.
Ah, okay.
That I know you know some of these, Ryan. The Opus 33 ones. I think they're called the Russian set of ones.
Yeah.
And of course they were very influential because it was no longer first violin plays the melody and the rest is accompaniment.
Finally.
It becomes a lot more democratic, or at least compared to what had been. So that becomes like an inspiration for Mozart to write these. So I think that it's like a really, really personal connection.
I was reading it was like a how to play string quartet book, but it was by it was like this old German guy. I wish I could, it's like Klaus Kleiber or something. And he wrote in the book, look, the first violin is the most important thing. So you can start rehearsals as soon as the first violinist knows his part. And I was like, oh boy, that would not work today,
You brought up
crazy.
We brought up this word already, but you mentioned it in a particular, maybe I want to explain one thing to anyone who might be watching. Going into this project and this show, what we thought was We want to step away from the low-hanging fruit, to steal a phrase Ryan likes to use in rehearsal. A lot of the time directed at me. That's okay. But this idea that let's step away from the obvious thing first, which is the playing and the music. Even though we will be playing, what can we learn about why we think it's awesome when we step away from those things? And I want to hit right away the word dissonant. Because for me, it's actually very difficult to think of that word removed from music. I only think of it almost as in terms of,
Same, maybe.
I know what it means in music, and that's how I think of it. Did any of you by chance go that route to look? We all had certain ideas of what we were going to research and what we were going to look up to find stuff. We don't actually know what each other has done just to set it up.
Oh.
But did anyone come across anything with that?
Not, for me, not, no, not non-music related.
Yeah, same.
I was happy enough to think I might have a spot for it, and it was like perfect. The page that I opened to, somebody else must have read it in this book because it went right to the spot the first time I looked at it. But it kind of answers the question of like, because like the dissonance that makes the quartet famous, it happens right at the very beginning, and it's in this little slow intro that the material just doesn't really, that mood doesn't come back in the whole movement. And it's so, why do we have this like wrenching kind of spooky thing at the beginning, and then the rest of the movement is like a total contrast. So this is I just want to offer a thought from, oh gosh, my phone wants me to edit the photo. Here we go. This is from an essay. It's called Using Our Flaws and Faults. The author is Marcia Sinatar. So here's the quote. No other part of our personality reveals our basic temperament, our fundamental way of working, any more than does our dark side. The part of ourselves which illogically unfolds at its own time and which has its own requirements. I'm referring to uncontrollable impulses, the habits we simply can't break, the unacceptable, contradictory tendencies moving us in opposition to the way we intended to go. These are the opposing thrusts that give our life richness and mystery. And it goes on further and further, but like that kind of answers the question why this intro is here. It's kind of like it's just there just because. You know, he just had to do it. I don't know. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
It's funny that you do this. I know this is going to seem weird, but you made me want to try something.
Oh, okay.
We're going to work backwards, so we haven't totally left this. But the piece could start at the allegro.
I think it is a great start if it starts at the 11.
Can we try? Can
Yeah,
we just,
I think, yeah.
What would that be?
Let me switch over here.
I mean,
You're already
Hey,
there. It
that's
grabs you
what
right
I-
away.
yeah. I mean, I do miss the adagio, but if I didn't know it was there,
You wouldn't.
it could
you-
work,
yeah.
right?
It would really change the way I walk out on stage for the performance.
Yeah.
Should we just jump to start how it actually starts?
Sure.
Just to contrast it? And let's just do the first
All right.
8 measures, though.
Here we go. The famous bits.
You having to start with the allegro first actually just really like hit.
Really?
Like I'd never thought about that, but oh wow.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
For me, it's funny when I think about this quartet. Like someone mentioned already, this movement is what, like 12 minutes long or something. It's not a short movement. You have 3 other movements, and when I think of this quartet, that's what I think of. Is that the opening is just so striking and shocking, and a lot of the rep we play is, by comparison, I mean, pretty out there, right? Or it can be sometimes pretty out there, whatever that means to you. And still, to me, this sometimes is, wow.
Before we dive too much in that, I did something.
Oh, okay.
You guys have a sheet of paper on your stand that we have not looked at. And just, I thought, is a great way to show dissonance. Why not do the opposite? I rewrote the first 8 bars, and I took out the dissonance. So we have not tried this. We have not seen it. So feel free to laugh. It's dorky, but I thought as a way of getting to see how it may have gone if we were thinking of more conventional rules for the time, whatever that means.
Okay.
Like I said,
That's so cute.
it's like really dorky. I know. But, I mean, this could be, I know some ethnomusicologist is going to turn over, but that could be a passable idea of this opening. It's, okay, it's major, sure, I changed that. But also just getting rid of the dissonance, it just completely changes, for me, the drama and the mystery.
And no insult to your version, but it's not memorable. You know, I don't mean it. I mean, when I think of the original, that's what I think of. It's, you're going to remember that it's, something you've not heard, very often.
Right. If I can just jump in, we are kind of tiptoeing around like what was expected at the time, and just like a little bit of context. We're kind of exiting the like galant style, which is basically melody plus accompaniment. So super, super simple, and that's where we probably get away from this. Well, if the first violin knows their part, everyone's good. So, we're getting away from that. But for me personally, when I think of like Mozart, maybe as compared to a late Beethoven quartet, which is, or even something that we would work on today, I think of it as generally more simple. I think of Mozart as, well, we just played this opening allegro, dun 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 da 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 da, right? Very nice and simple. But at the time, that was really not the case. I just pulled out a couple things of like early critics or reception. So here we've got early reception of the Haydn quartets was both enthusiastic and disgruntled. So we have this anonymous early reviewer. He wrote in some German or Magazin der Musik, and he gave a judgment characteristic of reaction to Mozart's music at the time, namely that the works were inspired but too complex and difficult to enjoy. So he goes on a little bit, that he has a decided leaning towards the difficult and the unusual, definitely unusual, but then what great and elevated ideas he has too, testifying to a bold spirit. So there's this kind of admiration, but also like, whoa, this is some weird stuff. And it's just so funny, like, 250 years later, we're looking at this and it's still weird.
That's fascinating. That I wouldn't have guessed that. So I decided to look, why do I think this is awesome by way of analyzing it, removed from key centers and all these kind of things. And the analysis that I've come up actually, in a weird way, ties directly to that. Because even though we're trying to stay away from the classical form and key structures in terms of what we're talking about, and for anyone that doesn't know, this is the time period that it is very structured, that most people who go to concerts know how a string quartet first movement's going to be set up. They know there's an introduction. They know there's a first theme. They know there's a second theme. And of course, like any great artist or art, you play on the expectations of your current audience, hopefully. And the analysis that I've done, I think, will help show this to someone who maybe hasn't thought about it in that way. I wonder if we could start the intro as is, play the whole intro, and then I could outline the couple things that I'm going to look at in terms of the rest of the movement that I find just absolutely intriguing. I don't know if I should say it first or if we should play it first and then say it.
Oh, let's play it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the three things that I found over and over and over and over in this movement that really make me just get so attracted to it are, the first thing, there's so much surprise everywhere. The first, like you say, it starts with a C.
What you expect
But
in C major.
and then I come in on an A flat. Do you want to just build that
Yeah.
really quick first?
Yeah.
So the first note, and then I come in. So it's my note surprising. Aviva's a little bit like, oh, okay, we've started with a different inversion
At
of
least
it.
there's a chord, though.
Yeah. And then you come in, and it's what? Okay, so here's this first element, surprise. The second thing that he does all the time is intriguing conversation. And it starts with it. We get this bass here that you almost don't even hear. And then right away, we have three separate entrances saying similar things or exactly the same thing and going somewhere different. So conversation. And the third thing is, I didn't even realize until you were just talking about this, that he does it in the intro. He always has short, short, long. So in this case, you get 4 bars of the first statement starting so and getting loud, and then it restarts. Now in a different key. We get another 4 bars, and then it restarts again, but now we get 8 or 9 or 10 bars, depending on however you think of it. These 3 things come back all over the place and in ways that I think make it incredibly interesting, and ways that I don't think he was thinking about these as like, oh, I'm going to have short, short, long here at all. But I think it's what draws me in. And I would love to, if we're done with the intro, go on to start showing how these things always come back.
Yeah, let's sink our teeth.
If there is something else.
I had a couple other things that I thought would actually just be fun to share with you.
Okay.
So, okay. I'm going back a little bit to Haydn again. And there's gonna, because I want to show you something that it takes a little bit of context, but this is a guy who thought very highly of Mozart's music. I wanted to read a quote. This quote, as far as I understand it, Haydn wrote to Mozart's father, they were closer in age, and wrote this about Mozart. he writes, "Before God and as an honest man, I tell you that your son is the greatest composer known to me, either in person or by name. He has taste and, what is more, the most profound knowledge of composition." Okay, first one.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's quite a statement. But I had a kind of a funny moment when I was reading this. I don't know why, but if anybody watching knows this reference, you will get it. But I couldn't help but think about Will Ferrell impersonating James Lipton. And James Lipton he ran the actor studio. Inside the actor studio.
Yeah.
And it's very flowery language and very enthusiastic. And I was going to ask, does anybody here have a good James Lipton impersonation? Or, sorry, a Will Ferrell impersonation of James Lipton. Sean?
I mean, I do, but the only things I can
Well,
say just shouldn't
I
be
was
said
wondering
on.
if you would just indulge.
Oh.
And I wrote the quote here.
Okay.
Just hand it back to me. But
Okay. So this is the
This
Will
is
Ferrell's impersonation.
Sean doing Will Ferrell doing James Lipton
'Kay.
doing Haydn.
Okay.
Okay.
Before God is an honest man, I tell you that your son is the greatest composer known to me in person or by name.
But you get see why I sort of could picture that in my head as I was
yeah.
reading it. That, oh my gosh, this is crazy. The reason I wanted to also include that is because it makes the next part a little bit more meaningful as well. Reportedly, Haydn was confused by this opening.
So were a lot of publishers.
A lot of publishers, yeah, and exactly. So you've versions with
Yeah, they thought there were
corrections,
mistakes. Yeah,
right.
yeah. Mhm.
Things like that. But Haydn is quoted as also then saying, "If Mozart wrote it, he must have meant it." I love that.
That's trust.
And then one other thing I kept coming across was how influential was this? And one piece that I saw coming back quite a lot that I thought it might be nice to listen to just a moment of it, because there's a parallel, is Haydn later goes on to write The Creation, which becomes one of his most famous works. I don't know if anybody here has played it before. It's a giant epic oratorio. It's basically written about the creation of the world as according to the book of Genesis. So, I mean, not small subject matter. It's like very ambitious. And you think, well, how would he start something like this? And here's where you start to see the parallels that some people say, maybe he was influenced by this because the first thing that he needs to represent is chaos, disarray. And he sort of, I could see the parallels, why this works. Now, his chaos is much longer than Mozart's, and it's maybe like 5 minutes or something. But then when it gets to "and there shall be light," what do we get? A giant C major chord. Maybe, is that, I don't know why I think of purity when I think of C major, like pure openness, and I don't know. It fits for me. Happens to be the same key as this. I could maybe see it. We don't have time to listen to all of it, but maybe I can play just a
Yeah,
snippet.
we'd love to hear
Sure.
some of it.
definitely hear some, striking similarities. Now, of course, he starts it differently. He gives you C right away. But then, I don't know about you, but
Oh,
I was not expecting it to go where it goes. And you can almost hear the very similar moving, lines to what happens in the opening of this quartet.
This idea of influence reminds me, I think it was Kurt Baldwin in the Ariana Quartet who told me this story. I'm sorry if I'm misattributing it. But like, you think back, 200 years ago, coming up on 100 years ago, that won't be true anymore, but, no recordings. You couldn't listen to something over and over again unless you could play it, or unless you had the skills on the piano to do it. And so to get your hands on another amazing piece of music must have been just so incredible, because it might not be all that frequent. The story he told me is when he was young, he met someone who was in their 90s who said, what we would do before we'd go to an orchestra concert, there weren't that many of them. So what we would do is we'd order the 4-hand piano reduction of the symphony and play it at home for weeks leading up to the concert. So we knew the piece really well. Then we'd go to the concert and to have all of the orchestral color suddenly there. Like going from a black and white television to a full color television is like such, and people did that stuff. So it's so easy to see Haydn maybe treasuring this and saying, well, I wonder what I can do with it. So cool.
And then one other thing I was curious about, because we've been talked a lot about the dissonances and why this note becomes something, changes our expectation. If you had to describe this to somebody, this opening, but you couldn't use practical theory, you couldn't use descriptions of your instrument or that sort of thing. Instead, you had to paint a word picture. What would you say?
endless tension.
Endless tension. It doesn't really resolve, does it? At least in the adagio.
Nope.
Of course, you can find all sorts of different ones. Ryan, was it Sean? In one of our early rehearsals, you said something about stalactites in a barren cave or something.
That was
Oh,
about the
Sean.
rhythm that starts in the beginning. That the rhythm it's always been there. It's been there for a long time. It's there, and then the rest of the movement kind of slides out of
There was one that stuck with me. I wonder if I could read it. Written by Mark Steinberg of the Brentano Quartet. And so he writes: "You come upon a Beckett landscape, barren and austere, alone with the pulsating background radiation of the cosmos. Lonely voice upon lonely voice happen upon the scene, foreign visitors, and they clash, yearn toward resolution, and are thwarted."
wow.
Yeah.
Being in his head sounds really fun.
I know.
It's like Lord of the
Wow.
Rings, style
Yeah.
epicness.
I don't know. For me, I started practicing after reading this, and it changed what I was doing quite a lot. Anyways,
I just have to point out that it's been 29 minutes, and we could still keep talking about this intro,
Yeah.
but I think that actually, in a weird way, answers the prompt that we were giving ourselves.
Sure.
This opening
Yeah.
is amazing.
it is.
To not forget about the rest, let's go on. I'm
Okay,
going to
yeah,
just
yeah.
quickly work through the exposition to show things that really, I think, make it awesome in addition to the introduction
Sure.
that I brought up. But let's just start. Let's play. Jason, can you play on your own from the Allegro? great. So right away, we get this beautiful theme. It's da 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 da. There's one, da 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 da, two, and then you get the rest of it. That's much longer. Then in bar 31, Aviva has loved it so much that she has to join in on the conversation.
Yes, yes, yes.
Could you guys just start 31 once? Great. So she has to go on. And same idea. We're going to have short, short, long. But what he introduces here that I find fascinating is additional conversation between Ryan and I. I guess I'm just going to start from 31.
Okay.
So we get this fascinating, of course, he has to repeat it. You have to join in.
Yeah.
But then we get this interesting conversation underneath it already. And is it commentary on it? Is it a separate thing altogether? It doesn't matter. It's just interesting. Then right where we arrived, which is 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, measure 36. This is right where we arrived. We get this 1 plus 2 plus long thing again. Can we just play right on that bar? Oh, let me switch this over.
It's 36.
Yes. 2. So one thing happens, it happens again, and then a longer thing happens, and then he sets up this other element that I was talking about, which is a surprise. We do this beautiful crescendo. Where does it go? Well, let's show them. Let's start in the same place. So he gives you a surprise, he sets it up, and all of a sudden this beautiful, elegant, and then he answers that with another surprise.
Yeah.
We have this surf forte. And now continuing right where we just were, which is 41, 2, 3, 44, we get this amazing conversation that happens. It starts with Ryan, it goes to me, and it goes around the rest of the quartet. And that sounds like this. So we get this awesome conversation. That's a long line, by the way, that starts. And then we get 1, 2. The third one is longer, and it's the surprise. And then right after the surprise, we get another surprise. And we start yet again, a 1 and a 2, and then he changes it. Can we start in 51? What you're going to hear is conversation between Jason and Aviva and I, a surprise with the loud, then another surprise with the soft. When that second surprise starts, you're going to get a 1, you're going to get a second time of the same thing, and then we're going to see what he does. Exactly. So we get the 1, 2. This time he just cuts it short. And then where does he go? A surprise. We get a full chord. This continues over and over and over. And mind you, for me, what's amazing about this is under the umbrella of impeccable form, impeccable key structures, impeccable transitions, that this kind of interest is happening. I have to point out, I mean, I could keep going like with the whole movement with this, so I won't bore anyone. But I have to point out one that I think is absolutely hilarious. Can we start in 71, beats 3 and 4 with you guys? And we're just going to play for a while.
Okay.
Okay, I have to point this out. This is just makes me laugh. There's some interesting stuff that happens right with that in conversation.
Yes,
That's all
yes,
there.
yes.
But it's 73, 4, 5, 6, 77. You start with your triplets there.
Yeah.
You get these beautiful 2 bars of triplets in this beautiful style. And then the viola comes in forte. It's like, I want to do this too. Da, 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 da. So you answer me, and it's like, oh, okay. Well, how about this? I quiet it down. You quiet it down. And then one more time, you'd think it's just going to end or go on. No, I have to do it one more time. And your way of getting me to shut up is saying, oh, yeah, and you up it, you go to the 16th notes,
Right.
and the 3 of us have this beautiful conversation like against you or whatever you want to call it. And then it's so invigorating that Aviva has to have her say in 88. Could we play it again and emphasize those things? If the things that I just mentioned aren't the thing that I mentioned, that's so clear, play them down just so we can hear this kind of stuff that's happening. Thank you. I think it's hilarious. And one of you mentioned this transition to stepping away from the first violin, getting everything. I mean, this is an amazing first violin part. You know, it's virtuosic, and it sounds so great the way you play it. But we each have such an invested part.
Actually, the spot where we stopped, I for some reason have a really vivid comparison to some of the more chaotic, not necessarily chaotic in the way it's written, but in terms of the amount of things happening. Examples from some of Mozart operas. I've played a lot of his operas before, and it just, well, of course, when you think of Mozart, I suppose our brain goes there anyways. But for whatever reason, right here, I just hear like all these different characters on stage sort of either pushing each other out of the way to sing or to be heard, and all the lines could work. You know, like every one of them is so interesting and beautiful, but he also makes them work together.
I
And
don't remember which one it is. He combines a march, which is in 2, and a minuet that's in 3, and the 2 work together. I don't remember which
think it's
opera this
Don
is
Giovanni.
in, but it's like this. Everything's going on at the same time.
in fact, I was thinking about it so much. I was trying to find like what's an example of this, just that I can show and say, hey, this is sort of what I'm talking about. And I did find an example from one of my favorite scenes in any opera, which is the Act 2 finale of Marriage of Figaro, which is a giant scene, exhausting to play, but it's got some of the most amazing music in the whole opera, and they're all, you know, all these different characters and moods. I don't want to say crammed in because that sounds cheap, but sort of. It's surprising how frequently he changes characters, and usually obviously dependent on what the characters are saying, but it all works. And then there are points where you can hear all these lines. Again, you sort of could pick who to listen to. Do you mind if I play just a short example of this? I mean, and it's just so many things, you know, musically just happened, and I wish we could listen all the way to the end. We're so close to the end of the act, but you know, that was what, a minute of music.
Yeah.
And again, back to this idea that Haydn influenced him to, in this quartet, to not let it just be how we start the allegro, bum, 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 against the melody, but instead in measure 30 or whatever, 31, where it's actually really involved. You could pick any of the instruments to listen to. And this part, can we play it once? This is, I don't think it necessarily sounds like that, but it has those same elements, like measure 91 is what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
And of course, remember, we've just finished this, as you were saying, almost one-upping each other like a built-in viola joke.
Yes.
So it's already, even this is going to be quite different. And of course, it continues, but
And I just have to point out, what do we get there? We get one thing happens, it happens again. Then the same thing happens, a different key happens again. They're both, all four of them are short, and then an extra long thing. So it's
Yeah.
even there, he's doing the same thing.
anyways, yeah.
I feel like we're getting close to a playthrough.
Yeah.
Should we do a playthrough of the whole thing? Was there anything else anyone wanted to add before we do that?
There's
I mean,
I
maybe
do
a few
have
things to point out
a
afterwards.
very
but-
random interjection,
Okay.
but I believe I could probably table that for another time.
Let's do it after.
Great.
Could be like an intermission thing.
so it's a playthrough?
I guess.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and take off my headphones so I can
Okay.
hear you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Do we turn them off?
Well, this was really fun. If you've enjoyed this, please let us know. We look forward to doing this every Sunday, same time. Next week, I believe, is This Is My Scary Robot Voice.
Yes.
I just have one question for you guys. For any of you, it doesn't have to be all of you. We sought out to figure out why we think it's so awesome, because we all do. And I'm curious, did this help any of you reach a conclusion that you maybe hadn't been at prior to all the research or discussion?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially like becoming aware of like the communities that came up around the pieces, and how much everyone's personally invested, in the music. And you know, it's easy to listen to something like this and think, oh, it's nice, but no, there's drama, there's fire, there's story, there's surprises, there's one-upmanship, there's little jokes here and there. This whole thing is teasing. Reminds me of Frank and his how you get him to eat his catnip. Just, a little bit. Frank is our dearly departed Frank, but he's
Former cat, not my
family
son.
cat. No relation, no relation. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening, and look forward to seeing you again soon.